Yeah, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Great weekend.
Do anything fun?
I did a lot of stuff. Spent way too much money shopping. What I hate about these long weekends is my wife has an opportunity to
Spend all the money.
and we made the mistake of going into Williams-Sonoma. You ever been in there? It's a cookie where you buy cookware and glasses.
I can't go in
We
there.
got classes signed up for. It's like, I knew I should have never walked in.
Oh, cool. Okay.
You know, you buy a pan for $180, and buy a knife for $150. My wife finds them very easily. You know, it's the always, you've been promising to take me thing.
And then
Ah, crap, got time to go.
for you got those little.
No, but yeah, I do need something that'll keep it from rolling off the.
They sell these little.
Yeah, there's little.
She signed up for a knife handling class, how to properly use the right knife for the right. So what it really means is when they're done, they're going to sell you sets of knives for like
You stayed through the regular. Yeah, you're staying through the regular meeting. Of course. Thank you. Cool. Try it out.
because of course you want to use what you just learned.
Might get a good deal out of this deal, you know. There's some payback here for you.
That's what I'm hoping for.
Does it cost to take those classes?
Some of them, yes.
She'll make me dinner. I'll buy her dinner.
They're like $20 a class.
Okay.
They're not.
Yeah, that's not so bad.
But so she's a disabled veteran. She has a VA card. They give her 10% off. So I'm like, well, that's a blessing.
I have a question too for you on the.
Oh, you got your talking blocks.
Been to Rodizio Grill?
Yeah, yeah.
I want more.
They didn't come from there, just so you know. Yeah.
Keep bringing the pizza.
Yeah, yeah. No thanks.
It's vegetables. It's all healthy.
Oh, yeah. Appreciate it. That's right.
I was talking to you, you weren't here. What? I can't see. What are you doing? Okay, put them on.
Well, how are you doing? Yeah, it was. How's you?
Steve said he'd be a few minutes late.
I don't. Yeah.
He said, please let the others know. Others, he's going to be late.
Joel went with her oldest son.
Nice.
I was going to join them.
He's going to be late.
Yeah.
Because
He's going to be late.
he never got it. He never called to see why I wasn't there either. I had
Well.
all weekend by myself in the house.
Well,
Every
hey.
year we use the furnace.
Oh, no.
Really?
Yeah. So it was nice.
Says, I may be a few minutes late. Please let others know.
I think that clock is a little slow though too.
I
Yeah, it's 6:01 right now, Mayor.
may need to borrow a plug-in. Dang it.
Get your microphone turned around. Sorry.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the City Council study session. Our first agenda item of the evening is Parks and Rec Master Plan update. Parks, Recreation, and Library Director Dorothy Hargrove is present to discuss the Parks and Rec Master Plan update.
Good evening, Mayor, members
Evening.
of Council, I got this right. There we go. We are here to provide an update on the public process that we have gone through to gather information about the needs for parks and recreation, all the research we've done about Pirates Cove and the feasibility of a possible expansion, and are looking for your guidance and input as we put together the draft plan, which you will then receive for further comment. I will introduce Jenna McKenzie from our consulting firm and Joe Sack, our Recreation Services Manager, who will take it from here and then will be available to answer any questions as we go further on.
Yes. No, I think it's yeah, that one.
All right. As I understand it, we have about a 30-minute agenda item here, 25 minutes. So we're going to go through this fairly quickly so that you have plenty of time for questions that hopefully we can answer. So we're going to go through the process, kind of what's going on with its needs assessment and what's coming out of it, Pirates Cove concepts, upcoming public outreach. So what we've done is a lot of work, and we've met a lot with the community, between the survey, and I can't remember at what stage we were here last time, to be honest with you, in terms of the update. It was early phase one. So a lot of stakeholder interviews and public meetings and in the parks, online survey kind of things, needs assessment and that kind of thing. So that's what we did early. Then we went through some of the playbook talking about some of the other things here, service analysis, and then the game plan's coming up here. So I'll go through that. I think what comes out of that is that it's a greatly appreciated service that the city is providing, and people love it. You guys are doing a great job. And I think that that we have these different categories of benefits that you provide. For example, with the homes that are near parks can be valued more. Provide a really important community identity, healthy living, economic development, youth engagement kind of services. So it's nice to make sure. Am I on the right slides here? It's not matching. No, that was the last time. I was wondering why I had deja vu here. We need to put in the other one that matches this presentation that was in that. I do.
Okay.
I apologize for that. We have a technical difficulties here. Refresher course. Meanwhile, I understand that y'all have blocks, right? So don't throw them at us right now. And that when you have a question, you're going to turn them up, right? So we can see.
We haven't had an in-service on how to use them yet.
It's like an egg timer. I think you'll really need a long one on this one.
Yeah. Probably. The putting the name tag thing up was apparently too difficult for everybody.
These are colorful at any rate.
Well,
People didn't use them, so I think this makes sense. If it's not on there, I'm going to be very surprised. I just took this right off.
Yeah, Council, while we do have an IT break here.
Okay, we'll do that. There we go.
Just flip these over when you want to talk. We're just trying to use a different indicator rather than using your name tag, because when you flip your name tag and then the camera gets on you there, your name tag's sideways. And so we figured we'd use a different indicator.
There we go. I was wondering why those check marks weren't further down the process there. I apologize for that. All right, so I guess the short story is that we'll be back to you with a public draft for you guys to have the comment, as Dorothy said before. So we've had nearly 600 citizens participate, and we're going to do some more outreach. And it was really good with a lot of the meetings in the parks that were well attended. So it was wonderful to intercept people in the parks that maybe hadn't even intended to show up for a meeting, but we found them and they came by, and then other people knew about it and showed up. So there was a lot of engagement. We had it at Cushing Park and talked about some of the things that could happen at Cushing Park, the recommendations that are emerging out of there. It needs some love. Cushing does, and needs new shelters. They aren't particularly safe now, the restrooms. So there's things like to the pond to improve the edges and its approachability. the multi-use field out there. There could be some things that are done to make that more functional, better landscaping and lighting. And there's west side of Inca that the city owns. You know where Little Dry Creek goes out on that side over there? That's underutilized, underappreciated, but it's also kind of overgrown and has become a place where some unsavory activities happen and people don't particularly feel safe sometimes on the trail. So there's things that are coming out of that would improve that area. Miller Field, as you know, has served the youth athletics ball field for a long time, and they've relied heavily on those use of those fields. But with Miller Field, there's some new thinking about possibilities of part of the community feels pretty strongly about the ball fields, and other ones feel really strongly about having a civic park in this location. It's sort of ripe for some improvements there and a festival space. Places where the community, it's larger piece of property where you can actually do more with festivals. And it's very centrally located, kind of in the heart of the community. So those are the things that are emerging out of the Miller Field. Well, what I wanted to say is that some of the synergies with the potential safety police complex over there could be quite synergetic with some of the improvements as well. So we want to make sure that that's captured as a synergy if that proposal moves forward. A lot of the parks need infrastructure improvements, including irrigation upgrades. So you've got standard sort of playground upgrades that need to happen, some other older shelters in parks that need to be upgraded, and that really needs to be a priority. You have these assets, and it's time to pay some attention to those and make those more functional for today. And the types of improvements reflect community feedback. So we had all of the parks arrayed where people made wish lists that said, here's what they would like, here's things that they would like changed, new things or things that are changed. So all of those improvements for each of the parks, and we're not going to go through each of them right now, and you'll see those in the draft plan when you get that. Duncan Park is your sort of flagship example. It's a beautiful park, and people absolutely love it. So we would love to be able to see those kinds of things happen over the next 10 years in your parks. The recreation center, you all are probably pretty familiar with that, but it has some ADA, Americans with Disability Act, challenges in terms of how to definitely to get upstairs and to make the locker rooms and restrooms accessible. And I don't know if there's anything really more to say too much about that, but to increase utilization, there's some tweaks in there and some underutilized space in the upstairs, for example, with the movement of some walls that you could make some better functioning spaces in there.
Along with evaluating all of our facilities and parks, spaces, and all of our amenities, we're also taking a deeper dive looking in all of our program. And the scorecard is an evaluation tool that is being used to recommend the improvements to all of our services offered by Parks and Recreation. So as you can see by the diagram is that if your services were running along a continuum along the bottom, and if you take a look at all the services are kind of the diagonal, all the programs and activities that we offer basically are along the public service line. And then you kind of go up the opposite side of the left side of the grid, which is the cost recovery expectation. So as you move from more of a public offering of programs all the way up to more private programs, you would anticipate that your cost recovery would be higher. So this is kind of a simple way to take a look at the scorecard process. Now to take a look more at our service categories, you see listed on the right are all the categories, and in order of more public on the top all the way to the more private entities. So your open access is really a park would be a good definition of what does open access mean. And it's a park. People can go there, they can drop in, you don't have to schedule anything, it's just open to the public. And food and beverage as being a very private service because I'm consuming something, I'm buying something to be consumed, and that could be identified like at our Pirates Cove concession stand. people are buying a product, a piece of pizza for lunch, that is the service. And so it's a very private service. So you would expect people not to have to pay to drop in to go to a park. And so the rate of return is very low. But your piece of pizza, people are going to have to pay full price for that cost of what it costs for that pizza. And this is just a matrix that the scorecard provides us. So basically the first thing that we take a look at with our services is, does it align with our purpose? And it's basically an easy question to ask. It's yes or no. Do these programs really align with our purpose, our mission with the city? And basically from there, you just follow the grid along down the line. Financial viability. Is it something where we are able to recover costs for the program? Is it financially viable? Can we offer the service at a reasonable cost? And then we go into the target market position, which is basically, are we capable of providing that service? And you have your yes and no's based upon the matrix. And then you get down to the competitive position, where that is, what is the market in our community? Are other people offering the same activity? And a good example of that would be parks. There's no one that's competing with us and offering a park, and we're the only competitor. So we're in a good competitive position with parks. But this is a simple kind of a grid that kind of guides along those lines. We have all the... I can. And so at the end result of this matrix, basically as we run each of our services through this matrix, it will tell us the answer that either are we going to invest in the service, are we going to collaborate with other people that might be in our competitive market, or is this something that it aligns with our purpose, with the mission, but we know that it's going to be something that the city is going to want to subsidize and continue that subsidy? Or is it best for us to try to take a look at the exit strategy of how do we remove ourselves from offering the service, just because it's not viable at all? And that's what the scorecard process will guide us through with each of our programs and our service levels. Moving on to Pirates Cove, the feasibility study has shown that Pirates Cove is very successful, as we all knew, and it continues to do so. But to continue to be at our competitive level and to remain in the market niche, we're going to have to continue to invest into that product. And basically, we did a very intensive study of similar parks. We compared their offerings and amenities that they have. We did a impact survey with all the users. We actually even had one of our subcontractors through the study actually sit out there one whole day at Pirates Cove and do just user input, everyone from the kids to the adults. And basically the findings show that, for us to really... and even going back into history, when Pirates Cove was originally created, we knew that we were going to have to invest. We knew that we were going to have to keep up. Originally, the plan was for us to add an amenity to that park every couple of years. One, what that does is it helps us stay vital. It helps the facility to remain fresh, and it keeps it new for more people to want to keep coming back, because it's not the same old amenities or attractions that we've always had. And that has proven true with the feasibility study. We haven't been able to keep up with that, and we've been very well maintaining what we have, but we haven't been able to add new attractions. And basically the feasibility study has shown that our audience is aware of that. And so the recommendations basically indicate that to do all of the things that people would like us to have at the park, it's about $5 million for us to be able to add and update the facility. Not knowing if that's going to be possible in the very near future, we actually took another look at it and said, well, if we were going to phase this in, or if we were going to do some priority, what could we do? And basically, what we could do is there's a number of different features, and I can go quickly through all of them. The large ride on the right of the slide is a mat racer, and that's just basically a large signature attraction, something where people can do together. This is just something that we identified. This wouldn't necessarily be the ride, though. It could even be a multi-person raft ride. But we use this as a good example because it's very popular and people can identify with it quickly. But you can have 4 users on this example. You can have 4 users at once use this, and they basically ride down mats. And there's usually a timer at the end that basically shows who was the fastest to get down to the end of the slide. But that's a signature attraction. It's a multi-passenger signature attraction, and that's one of the key features that is lacking from Pirates Cove today. That in itself would be about a $1.7 million investment. So that would be one phase that would be able to be completed. The other items that would need to be done is a replacement of our existing children's area, kind of an updating. It's a replacement of the play structure and the spray pad. And that's actually, you can see that it's a top photo in the middle. I'm not sure if this works or not. There it is. So that's this photo right here. And that's where the bucket dump. So everybody knows where the bucket is. That's our play structure. And that is something that is in need of being updated. It is original to the facility, and it has some maintenance issues that we're not able to nurse along much longer. We're doing the best we can, but some of the features, some of the spray nozzles just can't be replaced and that sort of thing, so it needs to be updated. The spray ground that's actually in the foreground of this photo is actually even in more need of repair. A lot of that is in ground, and the sprays don't function and that sort of thing, so that would be another phase. And that's about another 1.5, depending upon how elaborate we would have the play structure be, but that's another modest phase that we would be able to do. A couple of other things that we're able to take a look at is a climbing wall, and this is actually very inexpensive. My thumb slipped.
Just hit back.
Job security.
Okay. I won't let that happen again, Sam. So the structure right here is actually a climbing wall, and that's a relatively inexpensive feature that could be added to our main pool. And that's roughly around $50,000 that could be added. So it's just another amenity to add to the park that we don't currently have. It's something to be added to a normal our rectangular pole structure right now. Really, that's only used with a diving board, and we have a drop slide. And so there's a lot of unutilized space in that area that this would just add to an attraction that we already have. A couple other exciting features that were identified. This is a wave surfer. So basically, you are able to surf. Now that we have surfing down at River Run, people need a place to practice. And so, and this is a very popular attraction. It's actually more for sightseeing. It's a one-person ride, and it usually lasts anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute, and then the next person's up. But everybody just comes to be a spectator to watch how long people will last. So it's a pretty exciting kind of amenity, but it is another expensive amenity. It's about a $1.5 million structure just for that. There's a lot of the water supply, the piping, and the location to be able to put that. Another thing that was identified through our feasibility study, the last item, is a pavilion, kind of a group area. This could be something that we're able to use with our the daycares that come out throughout the daytime, and then we can also rent it out to larger groups, which would also have a return on investment for that. So a couple of these items can be bundled together. This could be basically a 3-year phasing plan, and we would need to kind of take a look at how we would be able to do that in the next couple of years if we wanted to move that to that direction.
And then the topic of off-leash dogs came up quite a bit in a lot of the meetings. Yes, and there are some conflicts with some other park users out there, and yet it's a very well-loved, very unique thing in the city of Inglewood. So, some of the biggest conflicts sometimes had to do with the fields and the youth sports that are happening in the same areas that people are running some dogs. So right now, the plan is recommending two things to think about. And it really has to do with maybe some new designated fenced dog parks. You just have that one there, right, at Bellevue. And some people could use that. There might be some areas in which that can be accommodated, but there's some, we have to search for that property. One area that might have been discussed was the west side of the Cushing, in that area over there next to Little Dry Creek on the other side of the road. Though access over there is a little challenging, so we've looked at some of those things, and there might be something over at Centennial Park or some other place where you can do that. The next one really has to do with the possibility of a licensee program, and Boulder has a pretty interesting model on how to do that, where you license, and then through doing that, you can pay for the ranger that's out there helping to police through all the different dog privilege parks that are out there right now. That would help it would actually probably pay for the ranger to salary to do that, and you might be able to solve that and then police the existing parks that are being used in a way that makes sure that people are cleaning up after each other, that you've got the right uses going on, and so forth. And it could be a very reasonable fee for that. So without having to have this plan solve all those issues, because I think it's going to probably take longer. We all believe it'll take longer in a public process to do that, is to work that on the side. The plan will recommend taking these steps towards this direction and then look at the feasibility with the Parks and Rec Commission to help guide that process with a good public dialogue about where to end up at the end of that. So that's where we are. The funding is always a challenge, in a community that money doesn't grow on trees, and so the 2006 master plan recommended some of those, and really none of which really were implemented. So we'll relook at what some of the options are, and as you grow in population, you're going to continue to have greater demand on a limited number of facilities. So that it's not like the need's not there, and it's not like people don't appreciate it and can understand that you need to make some investments in your park systems. They certainly, in the last year, especially, construction prices have gone up, and even since February, probably up 10 to 15% is what we've seen a jump in. So that's a reality of our world, and so knowing that, we will attribute costs to some of the improvements and try to figure out what that will cost for these parks. But we would like the City Council to be able to put that in your toolkit to say, what are these different options? And so when you move forward, the plan won't come up and say, you have to fund this way and that way, right? So we'll give you the suite of options and potential range that you might generate out of different kinds of funding options. And then when you go through that, just as Joe described about Pirates Cove, you'll have a package that you can work on over the next year, coming up to say, how can we move forward with these particular projects and get them into your CIP or whatever. So we already told you on the left what we're doing. We'll go to the P&Z and Parks and Rec Commission again. And at this point, we'd like to open it up for comments or questions with your handy little blocks there. Will be your first test case. So.
Questions or comments from council? Go ahead, Linda.
I'm really appreciative of the plan. Thank you. Appreciating the plan as it's developing so far, and I am on the Parks and Recreation Commission, so it's been fun to see this, even though the meeting was long the last time. But I wanted you to go back to the slide that talks about those progressive kind of...
the programs.
Yeah, the strategic, the philosophy, cost recovery. Can you give some examples? Because I think that was very telling to me during our commission meeting. What would, the public services, yes, but what's the dual benefit and then a private? So that we understand.
Is this one
yeah,
or the other one?
The other one, not that one, the one before. Yep, there you go.
Okay.
So basically, as was mentioned, a very public service would be a park. So that is, it's open to anyone. Anyone can come into the facility and utilize it. And those are relatively at low cost. Another public service example would be like a special event. Something that's open to the community, like Sounds of Summer, Kids Stage, those types of things. It's something that's open to the public. It's at relatively little or no cost, and it's open to everyone. And then as you move up to the
No cost to the consumer
no
of it, I
cost
think
to
is
the consumer, yes, to attend.
That's
to
where
attend
the city
as the
puts
guest.
most of it takes care of all the expenses, and then
Yes.
it goes up. So explain the dual one.
So the dual benefit is basically where it's mutually shared. So it's a program where it is going to be subsidized. The costs are subsidized, but then also the individual user is paying a portion of that. Now, it's not always determined that it's at 50%. It's a community decision of how that is subsidized. So a dual benefit would be, for example, a good example would be youth learn to swim lessons, where you have it very much a service aligns with the community's mission. You want kids to be safe. You want them to learn to swim. It's a safety concern. So we would basically offer those programs and have those programs, even though that we know that to keep them accessible, that we would have the costs at a lower rate. So they would pay some, but it probably wouldn't be 100% cost recovery. And then as you get up to the private services, a good example that we've been using is like a personal trainer. Someone that is coming in, this is an individual benefit. I'm coming in to hire a personal trainer to address some health concern that I want to work on. And basically at that point in this model would be at a higher rate of return. So it might not still be at 100% cost recovery, but it would be something that it's at a much higher than some of the other programs that have a dual benefit. It's a safety concern, but it also improves the individual. A private would be basically the only one that's going to get help from being working with the personal trainer is that individual that would get that benefit.
So when we were talking in the Parks and Rec, we were talking about the philosophy behind this, though, and the decision-making that has to go into the private services. At what level do we subsidize a personal trainer? That's a private use. And what level do you want to recoup all of it? I mean, we're some of the cheapest private training. If you want to get a private trainer, Englewood's the place to go. And they're good, too. So, but to what extent should public amenities or taxes be put forth to provide a private service? But there are other examples, too. But that's a good one.
Well, we have a series of kind of going through this.
I'm only bringing them up as examples so people understand. I thought this was really helpful to realize the decision-making process that needs to go into fee setting, and we need to know if we're going to ask them to get more fees out of some of the services. We have to philosophically agree that some of these are more important to take more fees than others, and it's a value decision that every council's faced with, I think, in helping set those. Community values. Yes, community values, right.
And I think you make a very good point. And if you look at the bottom here again, which one goes to get them all down here to this part down here? So you have 3 out of the 4, you have choices of things that you could choose still to do, right? On the right-hand side is more of the subsidy categories, and the ones on the left are more, pay your own way kind of things at the end of the day. So, but the reality is there might be some right now that you may choose to discontinue doing because of these other factors that are going into it as well.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none. Oh, wait, we do have one. Rita?
Oh.
So in the master plan, are we going to be deciding which
Microphone.
things Sorry. In the master plan, are we going to be deciding which things we need to exit from and which things we need to subsidize?
No. What I'm hoping that we'll get feedback and a level of comfort with is that this is a framework by which we can make decisions over the next several years. So if we decide to stop providing personal training, we will be able to identify why that decision was made. But it's not, individual programs will not be part of the master plan. What we're hoping is that the priorities about The parks that we wanted to address, primarily Cushing and Miller, would you agree that those are top priorities? Recognizing that funding it is an issue and it's something that we need to work on over the next few years. That this is what Pirates Cove is going to look like. Those prioritizations are probably the most important part of the draft plan.
Okay, and so things like Pirates Cove, those adding on those amenities, would that increase? I mean, would we increase the entrance fee to cover those costs? Or would we keep the entrance fee the same as we have it right now?
Well, we continually increase the entrance fee even as it is. I mean, but the question is the balance between, the price and a diminishing return. I'm assuming we would increase that, but we would certainly present an analysis before we, invested any further. But that's, it's a larger question of whether we should continue to invest in Pirates Cove. And the other amenities.
And so that's still on the table.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, and if once the master plan, the parks master plan is in place, it is just a guideline. But what if we realize that there's no funding? And I'll tell you, my major concern is to see things in here like we have a huge deferred maintenance backlog, and then when we apply for grant funding and all of those things, yes, we can do funding, or yes, we can do maintenance because we maintain all of this. And then the growth piece to this and buying new parkland.
Well, buying new parkland is not a recommendation of this master plan. Basically, we've said if we can't afford to maintain it, we should not add to our inventory.
Okay, and I think another thing that needs to occur also is how much growth can we sustain with the current parks. And if we're going to get overcrowding, then we better be careful about how much we're going to grow.
It does bring that forward. You're absolutely right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Just that a little bit about the off-leash dogs. I know that's a kind of always a touchy one, and I feel like we ended up in the spot we ended up in because fencing areas where the dogs play is difficult to keep it green or keep any sort of grass growing there without really substantial efforts, both from a irrigation as well as a labor sort of standpoint. So I don't know. I guess I'm just a little bit concerned about where that might go and where those locations might be and how that amenity might appear to the folks who have been using the green park system currently, and if they get kind of put into some fenced areas similar to what we have currently, that they might not be happy about that either.
And again, that is not necessarily the recommendation. The recommendation of the plan is that this is an issue we need to address. What the answer is, I can't say, because it is an important amenity. We have to balance it. Are there other alternatives? What we're recommending is a continuing discussion on the topic because it came up so loud and clear at our community sessions.
And is there a process for that?
Well, we're hoping to work with the Parks and Rec Commission and community groups and the homeowners. I think it'll be, a very detailed process.
I think we should be a little bit clearer. We're not recommending taking away dog privilege parks, and that the ranger program would be one step to see how this works to manage some of the issues that are occurring out there right now. So, don't need to get the public all upset about taking away something. I think it's more about just how do you manage that better.
The fenced areas is one possible solution.
That's
to
in
the
addition.
problem.
In addition of one.
So there's some people who want some fenced dog parks, or they want it off leash, because not everybody has their dogs under voice control and command, and so those who aren't behaving well in the parks, that you need to get sent to the fenced dog park till you get your dog in order. I'm just kind of saying it bluntly,
No, fair
right?
enough. I misunderstood what you were saying.
Or small animals or whatever. So perhaps the slide wasn't clear enough on that, because there's different levels of responsibility with the owners, but also, dogs training. So we see a need for an additional dog park, fenced dog park, so that people in other areas of the city can access that. So,
thank you. Other questions or comments, Lorette?
To Rita's point, I appreciate that you're trying to create a a matrix so that you can answer questions, but the matrix has to be done within the budget, and the budget has to be set prior to that. That kind of, it can't just ebb and flow whenever. It's got to be identified prior so that there can be some budgeting, that it's in the budget framework. Okay. And then we've had problems over the years. We do have code enforcement right now, and code enforcement is supposed to enforce this. I would like to know, and there's been some resistance to doing that at both the off-leash parks and in the fenced-in areas for the rules that are pretty clearly posted, and every once in a while we get a group of people that are upset one way or the other. But code enforcement seems to have been pretty reluctant on enforcing that, any rules there. So either that or there's no violations and no need for any of the rules. So if there is no need and the rules are being followed, then it's unlikely that a ranger would pay for himself. If there is some concern on code enforcement's part that there is the availability there or that there's non-compliance, then it would be helpful to find out exactly how they're enforcing, what problems they're seeing, to make a determination on whether a ranger would be sustainable or not, or whether it would do us any good.
Well, obviously that's part of the discussion. You're absolutely right. But we're at this point, the park ranger would not be able to issue fees, citations. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. The registration of the dogs would pay for a part-time park ranger. That's what we're recommending, because
registration of the dogs as a
licensing
citywide program, or just the licensing? Okay, good luck. All right.
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah.
Okay.
I gotcha.
Thank
If
you.
you want to use the facility, I don't know if it's would that be something that if you owned a dog you'd have to have it, or if you were just using the parks you'd have to have it?
Well, these are all questions that will need to be answered going through the process. These are the discussions that we had during these focus groups and feasibility groups, and actually they were coming from both sides. These were, some of the recommendations, because the community is very tied to their privileged dog parks and off-leash dog parks, but they don't want to lose them. And probably, and we've all agreed that the people that are talking to us are probably the people that have very well-maintained dogs. It's the other people that aren't coming to the table that are causing the problems. And these are dogs that are running through soccer games. These are dogs that are running through other events. We've heard stories that the dog ran into the pavilion and ate the birthday cake from the party. They're not being reported to code enforcement, because what do you do once the dog has eaten the birthday cake? You're upset, you pack up and you leave, and you don't call code enforcement. So there's really no tracking of these. These are just incidences that we're hearing from the users over time, and it's built up. And we know that there are certain places where we have more conflicted uses. So from all the people, from all the sides, because we did feel that we had a good perspective from both sides of, would more fenced-in dog parks help? We think it would, because it would relieve some of the pressure from some of the other parks. Could potentially a licensing program so that people will get some training along with how to use the parks appropriately be beneficial? And could that then subsidize enforcement? Because right now there isn't a lot of enforcement. This person would be able to maybe do some patrolling going around and catching the instances when dogs are running into the soccer games and that sort of thing.
But that was my question. If they're not going to, enforcement isn't, hey, don't do that, dude. That's a ticket. That's enforcement. And if you're not going to have a ranger, and that's what I thought when you said a ranger who would be self-paying, would be enforcing something and then generating a ticket, like a cop or parking meters in Denver, because they must be making $1 gazillion off my son alone in Denver when he's going to school there. But if you're going to do licensing, and the vast majority of people do not use those parks who have dogs, the vast majority, and if they're going to feel like they're subsidizing that, I think you're going to have some pushback. But if you're going to have people, and the only time you're really going to see them is not in somebody's backyard, it's going to be when they're at a park or one of these things, and you don't really have enforcement where somebody's writing a citation, then the whole thing is just counterproductive.
I understand
So
what you're saying,
if-
and that's
if
all part
you
of.
could bring the information next time. I just had a question about that.
I
and
understand.
kind of-
And we weren't necessarily advocating, and this is all part of the process as well, that every dog in Inglewood is licensed. It's the license to use the dog privileged parks.
Oh, I'm sorry, then I misunderstood the answer.
Yeah, it's a way of saying if you're here, and in some places they make them prove that their dog is under voice control before they get the license. You know, so there's all sorts of variations of this, but it is a self-funded kind of thing through that.
Goes to
So
planning and zoning next.
our document will be written, and then we'll go and we'll update, and we'll go through that process with that. Yeah.
It'll be available to the public.
Yeah, the draft,
Yeah.
and then we'll go to P&Z.
Does that make sense?
Other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, thank you so much for all your efforts with this. Moving on to our second agenda item.
It wasn't. I thought it was plugged in. Oh.
I gave it back to you.
Which is historic preservation. Doug Cohn from the Inglewood Historic Preservation Society is present to discuss historic preservation. He's got a team of folks in shirts. Matthew Crabtree is joining us as well. Feel free to bring whoever you'd like to the table here.
We will do that. Thank you. And it looks like you're firing up the PowerPoint for us. That's awesome. I'm going to let our president, Matt Crabtree, start the conversation.
Thanks for being here, everybody. Maybe we'll start with an introduction. I think we all know each other, but why don't we do a quick round robin just to make sure everybody knows who everybody is here. Oh, you guys even wear name tags. Look at that.
Paul, do you want to start?
Yeah, why don't we, yeah. Oh, sure. Oh, that's fine. Now, all right, now that we're all situated here,
Welcome.
First off, I'd like to start off by saying thank you for the opportunity to be here. We as the Board of Directors for the Inglewood Historic Preservation Society and our members here tonight are very grateful for the opportunity and very honored for the opportunity to be part of this discussion in talking to you about the importance of history, historic preservation here in Inglewood. So, as Mr. Mayor, he recommended, let's go ahead and kind of go around and introduce everybody from the Board of Directors here, and we also have a special guest this evening also. So we'll go ahead and start with Paul here. I'll move the microphone on down.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, city manager, and other guests. It's a pleasure for us to be able to speak to you about our favorite subject. My name is Paul Skaczynski. I'm the Vice President of the Society.
Howdy, I'm C.J. Cullinan. I'm the Secretary.
And I'm Matthew Crabtree. I'm the President.
Doug Cohn, the Director of Programming.
I'm Ida Mae Nickel, and I'm the Outreach Director.
I'm Lauren Reiki, and I am the Endangered Places Program Director with Colorado Preservation, and I'm here as a guest tonight.
Welcome.
Okay, well, to start things off tonight, we have a PowerPoint presentation, and we have a lot of exciting things to talk about. First of all, history in Inglewood is really unique. There are very few other cities out there that can boast the amazing accomplishments that a lot of the people here in the city of Inglewood over the course of the over 100 years that Inglewood's been around have accomplished. You know, we've all heard about the history of well, maybe all of us here, but not everybody in the community has heard about the history of the airplane that was manufactured on South Broadway, or the trolley that went up and down the Broadway corridor. These are all things that are very unique to Inglewood and have a lot to do with our identity. But there's so much more history out there that many of our residents, and quite possibly many of you, don't even know about the accomplishments of the people that have lived here. And really what it comes down to is This is who we are. This is our identity. And actually, there's one accomplishment that is really amazing, and we found out about this recently, and Doug may have talked about this, but there's in 1945, there was a invention that occurred here in Englewood, an invention and patent that reached the IEEE 20th Century Milestones in Electronic Engineering, and has a American Society of Mechanical Engineers landmark. This invention was patented, invented, and even, well, it's by a company that still exists here in Englewood. This is the history that we need to keep telling our generations. This is the history that we need to capitalize on as a city and really form our identity around. Well, the invention was so the next time you go to Discount Tire or wherever and get your tires balanced, the technology used to electronically balance your tires was invented here in 1945 by Merrill Industries, a company that still exists. A lot of people don't know that, and that's a fascinating bit of history here. But tonight, our presentation, we'll go ahead and start off with our mission statement here. Our mission. As our mission, the Englewood Historic Preservation Society endeavors to identify, gather, preserve, and protect our city's history, legacy, by acquainting and educating our citizens, their children, visitors, and new residents to our city about our roots and the importance of history to maintain a strong foundation in building for our future. Tonight's presentation will be predominantly via PowerPoint here. We'll go through with various people speaking, and then at the end we'll offer an opportunity for questions and answers. We also have a special guest with us tonight, Lauren from Colorado Preservation Incorporated. She's offered her time tonight to help us with our presentation and talk a little bit about the benefits of historic preservation. So really, the main thing I think that brought us to the table, or one of the main things, there's a lot of stuff we'll be talking about tonight, but the really probably the crucial thing right now is the Englewood Comprehensive Plan. As many of you know, the original draft of the Englewood Comprehensive Plan included information in there and included portions that were historically oriented. Those sections were actually very well written. And through various revisions, I guess, that has somehow been removed from the comprehensive plan. So we're here tonight to request that the Englewood City Council recognize the importance of history and historic preservation and put that back in the comprehensive plan. And to incorporate language in the comprehensive plan that promotes, encourages historic preservation and education. We've taken an opportunity also, and we'll talk about this through our presentation, to provide some recommendations on some of the wording that could be applied to the comprehensive plan. So the wording that we've recommended really falls into many different categories within the plan. Strategy and vision, shop and work, play and learn, and especially live. Shop and work is, I think, a unique opportunity for the city of Englewood to capitalize on areas like Littleton Boulevard or downtown, in various places downtown. They've capitalized on the historic nature of that area and could be a business encouragement for small business here in the city of Englewood. So on to the next part of our presentation. We'll go ahead and go on to Doug Cohn here. He'll start with one of our ideas.
Good evening. In 2005, the Englewood City Council adopted an ordinance, Englewood Municipal Code 16611, a preservation code. And for brevity, I'm going to call the Historic Preservation Commission, HPC. That I'll keep using that word, that initials. I'm going to use that a lot. When the Preservation Code was adopted in 2005, a part was left out. There should have been a commission that actually could do something with 16611, and that was never activated. So then you say, well, what is a Historic Preservation Commission? What does it do? It's a commission that desires to save historic buildings and places. the Historic Preservation Commission would designate historic areas and landmarks for the educational, cultural, and benefit of Inglewood citizens with the consent of City Council. It would preserve and protect buildings and structures and sites and areas that are reminders of past eras and events and people. The HPC would be an official commission like the Planning and Zoning and Parks and Rec and URA, appointed by City Council. It would be a city commission that you guys would establish. You guys would appoint the members of it, and as a council, you would have the final say over the recommendations that those guys make. It would be a recommendation council, and you guys would have the final say on that. Let's see, start at another point. At the end of June, we had a town hall meeting. Mark Rodman from History Colorado came and presented one version of the HPC called the Certified Local Government. I think some of you guys came to the presentation, and we didn't know much about how an HPC worked, and it was a good first step just to kind of get an idea how the thing worked. A number of concerns were expressed. What about private property rights? We recommend that the private property rights be fully recognized and honored. There would be voluntary participation only. How would it affect zoning? The HPC could recommend historic overlay zoning if 2/3 of the people in the neighborhood agreed with it. How would the members be chosen? They would be chosen by you all as city council members. How would this HPC work with the Historic Society? We would be different groups, but we would work together on projects. Would it be part of the city government? Yes, in the same sense that the boards and commissions are part of city government. Would there be city staff involvement? These were all questions brought up during that night. The answer to that is yes. It would require some staff time to be the connecting person between the volunteer commission and you as councilors and the government in general. And that would cost some money. Would the council have to approve its recommendation, the committee's recommendations? And yes, the council would have to consent before anything could formally be done. Another question was raised, do we really want to save historic buildings? And there was some disagreement about that at the meeting. What about the developers? The creation of a Historic Preservation Commission and the Preservation Code could have some impact in the sense that they would talk about architectural standards and having your structure fit the surrounding neighborhood. These are kind of things we talked about that night. Would an HPC have to be part of a certified local government? And the answer to that would be no. It could exist independently. I visited the HPCs in Cheyenne and Lakewood, and I've studied those in Littleton and Brighton and Buena Vista and Louisville and Monte Vista. There are a lot of different variations that I would strongly encourage this group to think about bringing to life the commission that would work with 16-6-11. And we do not recommend that our HPC would be part of the certified local government at this point. Indeed, we could not be. The Preservation Commission would have to exist for a while before it could even qualify. We recommend also that the board have at least 2 members from the Historic Society on it. Now, what would a Historic Preservation Commission do? These 2 guys on the end here are going to answer that question.
Dun, da, da, da. So Paul and I will be sharing this one. So the first one that I'm going to touch with is generate an inventory of historic and architecturally significant structures. Preserve what is. Identify what is significant to the city of Inglewood. Not only us as the Preservation Society, not only you as the council, but to the public, to the city of Inglewood. We have lost many structures already. There's an urgency to save those that do remain. Invite the public by print, internet, word of mouth, maybe even through building permits, to submit their property for possible consideration. Encourage the cooperative spirit, working with owners to maximize our community's interests and history. The next part, define qualifications and criteria for recognition. Recognize what is. The qualifications and criteria have been established in various areas, localities, statewide, nationwide, and the idea that that could continue. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, that some of that information is already out there, definitely would save time as far as establishing what we would qualify for recognition. And defining worthiness. It is interesting. There are some buildings we already know that may not be worth the time and energy and finances and funding or resources to reestablish it to its grandeur of before or even to its knowledge. But just that idea of being aware of what is worthy. We would look at its age, its architecture, its historical significance, and maybe an individual that was fairly historically significant to Inglewood. The next part, provide local historic landmark registration and recognition. To me, it's publicize what is. Recognition would have historic markers, maybe, for posting. We would even encourage a listing, maybe on the Inglewood City website, as well as our Inglewood Historic Preservation Society. And as a member of the Arapahoe Acres neighborhood, that idea that we're also concerned about some of these recognitions, that idea of where do we go from here. And so I pass it on to Paul.
Thank you, CJ. And I'll continue with talking about the way we envision perhaps a historic commission could be designed. Certainly it would be different from our historic society, but hopefully would be collaborative and cooperative, so that we would continue to do what we have done well with our newsletter, with our monthly lectures, and other outreaches to the community, cooperation with the schools of Englewood in presentations that we have made and will continue to do. And so with that idea then, what we have is essentially suggestions as to what would be the makeup of a commission. Ultimately, when council has established it and named members to it, they will come up with their own idea, but this will give them a foundation to build on. So we feel that it's important to develop historic and architectural standards and guidelines. This is somewhat different from the qualifications that are required for identifying those historic structures, in that this relates more to what it takes to maintain a structure as historically important. If it has received that designation, then it is incumbent upon the property owners to live up to certain standards, and that can more be identified in detail at a later time. But the idea is important that that standards be maintained. Assistance in guiding design and ways to maintain historic significance. Let's say a homeowner or even a business owner has a property that's been designated as historically important. The commission could serve as a resource for helping to work with the homeowner or property owner and doing whatever upgrade is planned, making sure that it fits within the historic guidelines. The commission should prepare a series of general guidelines that are available to any property owner that requests it. And in fact, they could serve as a review board in a kind of voluntary situation with a property owner says, well, this is what I'd like to do. Can you, members of the commission, review this and advise me? Okay. Beyond that, then, continuing to the documentation of Englewood's history, this has been done once. It's a book available here at the library, and there are a few other personally owned copies around. It's a book that was assembled by our predecessor, the Englewood Historical Society, now defunct, and we have chosen a distinctly different name. This book was assembled essentially by copies of articles in newspapers, magazines, photographs, and things. It's a very good resource. I've looked at it a number of times myself, and it is available here at the library. It's not to be checked out, but to be used right here at the facilities. That's a good thing, but it's not enough. And what we need to do now in the age of technology is to make the history of Englewood available digitally. We would like to see, over a period of time, gradually created a database of matters of historical interest, whether it relates to a structure or simply the stories of history from the city, so that this could be available both, again, on the city website and EHPS website. We'd like to make this available to any citizen that is interested. And there should be steps available to make accessibility for this information using the internet connections, and make sure that it's available to the public. So that's kind of our preview of what the commission might look like. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move it on down to item A here, and she'll talk a little bit about. Thanks, Doug. She'll talk a little bit about the collaboration with the Historic Preservation Society.
Okay, my part is to advocate history program that encourage community involvement in education, develop educational programs in the Englewood Public School System focusing on the historic accomplishments of Englewood and the surrounding area. Doug Cohn has been sending history series to the Englewood High School for the high school Pirateer newspaper, with the idea of interesting the journalism students in writing Englewood history. 3 of our members have taken early Englewood history into the elementary schools and introduced it to the second graders. Our goal in the future is to continue the education to older elementary children and instill the love and interest in our local history. Research and design a historic bicycle and or walking tour, and I passed that around. Copies of the Englewood history tour given to you are just a sample that our society had come up with shortly after we began our lectures. There are more historic buildings and areas to showcase, and historic markers, and some with memorials such as the 9 citizens who died in the Alexander film fire. We would like to do a memorial to them. Coordinate, provide, and archive historic lecture series for the general public. We have been providing educational history lectures monthly to the general public since May of 2012. Out of one of our recent programs showcasing the famous Englewood Speedway, folks held a successful reunion in the Elks parking lot on August 28th, 2016. Approximately 1,200 people participated throughout that day. It was wonderful. We also have a historic website, and we send out a monthly newsletter with historic articles and upcoming events. Our future goal is to archive family history involving our citizens. We need to establish a history museum. History tells us a story and has enormous power in bringing the past before our eyes as if it were the present. To establish a history museum, our legacy is in is an interconnection across time with a need for those who have come before us and a responsibility to those who come after. A history museum encompasses past and future, old and young, and brings a caring for history. Me, then, becomes we. We, the Inglewood Historic Preservation Society, are so appreciative with all that is happening with our history in the past 2 years, working with our city manager, Eric Keck, and in the library with Dorothy Hargrove, who started by giving us the opportunity to have a display in the library window. And I'm going to take a moment. I want to pass this around. This is Lindsay. Lindsay Runyon is our graphic designer. She does an outstanding job. And these are pictures that have been in our window display downstairs in the library. And if you could just all take a peek at those, please. We are very excited about the potential of working with the Museum of Outdoor Arts. Oh, too close? Okay. And anyway, we're very excited with the possibility of working with the Museum of Outdoor Arts and Cahoots in creating a quality display of Inglewood history. The opportunity to work together with the Historic Preservation and the Library Commission would be a dream come true for us and very welcomed. We are grateful to you, the City Council, our City Manager, Mr. Keck, and Dorothy Hargrove for the opportunity you've given us. Thank you so much.
All right, we'll move on to the suggestions we have for the comprehensive plan, but I just kind of want to summarize here that, you know, there's really a lot of opportunity here in the city of Inglewood, specifically with history, but then what we do with that history. A lot of residents are moving into this city. There's a lot of homes that are being replaced with new structures, and there's a lot of change happening here in the city of Inglewood, and it's very quick. This is kind of our opportunity to hold on to the community that we know of today and then kind of go forward. I understand that we can't save every house. I understand that we can't save every neighborhood. But we can kind of build on what we've had in the past. We can encourage developers. We can work with developers and encourage them to use certain architectural guidelines when developing new houses. So when you drive down the street, there isn't that dramatic or drastic change in architecture or change in neighborhood. We could encourage developers to, instead of tearing down structures, to adaptively reuse them. This is a technique that's been used in other communities in different ways, but I think it could be adopted to homes also. Maybe a certain percentage of the front facade would be kept the same, and that addition could be built on the back. In fact, there's a developer on Lincoln that did that. So there's a lot of opportunity here. But what makes this discussion so timely is that big change. And we need some sort of plan going forward for what the city of Inglewood's going to do for history and for preserving our community. So on to the comprehensive plan suggestions. We handed out, actually we provided to the city all this information in a document. We've kind of been following this. I don't know if you guys have it. I do have a copy here if anybody needs it. But the recommendations for the comprehensive plan recommend that the comprehensive plan includes the importance of history and historic preservation. Incorporate language in the comprehensive plan that promotes and encourages historic preservation and education. Comprehensive plan suggestions related to history and preservation. So to start out with the strategy and vision section, this is kind of what we see. Now, some of this that you'll see in here is actually what was in the original draft of the comprehensive plan. Now, we've taken the opportunity to expand upon that and kind of grow it a little bit. Not all these have to be selected, but it would be good to see at least a large number or some of these to be included in the plan. So under strategy and vision, create a historic preservation commission with the responsibility of generating an inventory of historic and architecturally significant structures, providing historic landmark registration, recognition, and developing historic and architectural standards guidelines. Conduct an exploratory study on the opportunities for preserving historically significant structures and landmarks. include options for reforming the city's historic preservation code, and rely on incentives and respect property rights. And that's really the big part here, is to respect property rights. Then to maintain a focus on the importance of historic preservation while recognizing and respecting private property rights through voluntary involvement. Now, under the Live section, we can retain historic character and form in our established neighborhoods, incentivize preservation of homes identified as possessing historical and architecturally significant character, encourage development to include adaptive construction techniques to preserve a percentage of the existing structure when demolition is considered, such as street facing or front facades, instead of complete demolition. This could apply to both commercial and residential properties. Incorporate a local historical, cultural, and aesthetic references in new housing developments. Accessory dwelling units, now that's a discussion that's been going on recently, and that actually offers a unique opportunity for historic preservation because that allows for the reuse of a structure. If you have a small home and you don't have enough room for people living in the existing structure, being able to build a accessory dwelling unit or have a accessory dwelling unit on the same structure may make that home relevant again and not have to be demolished. Shop and work. Use history to promote local business districts. This is huge. This is what a lot of cities are doing right now. Littleton really, they play into this. I mean, Denver plays into this. History, and specifically the history from the early days of our city, is really fashionable right now. This is something that we need to really focus on and capitalize on. Identify and encourage preservation of historically significant commercial buildings. Incentivize restoration of historically significant commercial buildings. Under play, encourage artistic and our historical elements in new developments with facade enhancements. Learn. Provide educational information available to new homeowners of the historical significance of their area. Establish a history museum. Develop educational programs in the City of Englewood public school system, focusing on the historic accomplishments of Englewood and the surrounding area. So I'll go ahead and kind of summarize here with a quote from Doug. History is a lens to look at ourselves, to find solutions to problems, to understand our past and our present, to explore new places and ideas with the goal of improving our situation. History is made by people who think of new things and do not give up. Now, obviously we want to generate enthusiasm for history, so this is our board of directors here. And I'm going to go ahead and hand the microphone down to Lauren, and we're really grateful to have you here tonight to help us with help us understand the benefits of historic preservation in a community. I'll give you the
Thank you. Okay, perfect. Well, hi. I'm very happy to be here tonight and to build upon everything that they just spoke about and talk a little bit more about sort of the basics. What is preservation? Why does it matter? And how it can benefit Englewood. And then in addition, I'll talk a little bit about our organization and how we can help with that as well. So just a few basics about preservation. It provides a direct link with the past, the present, and the future. It provides living history. It provides economic development and revitalization. It is inherently sustainable. The greenest building is one that is already built, that is existing. It provides a cultural link to the past, and it conserves space by using existing buildings. Oftentimes, a lot of preservation terms are thrown around, so I just wanted to kind of go over the differences between common terms that are used. Preservation, and when we're talking about development, it is maintaining a historic form, integrity, materials, often such as like a house museum that uses preservation. Rehabilitation is improving a resource to make it compatible for a new use. This is often used for downtown development, converting an office building into apartments, or redeveloping an existing commercial structure. Restoration is removing or adding architectural elements to bring a resource back to a certain period. A house museum could also be an example of that. And then reconstruction is simply rebuilding a resource based on historic documentation. And the board touched on local, state, and national register listing, and these are the most common and effective ways of recognizing a site's importance. And I want to emphasize that that's mostly what they do, is they recognize that it's important. They don't, National Register listing in and of itself doesn't provide any restrictions on a property. Local and state registers may do that, but that is dependent on each city. And they also increase the potential for funding opportunities for the designated buildings. And again, listing in the National Register does not inherently protect a site from demolition or restrict what you can do with the property. And they touched on some of creating guidelines for what should and shouldn't be done with a historically designated building. There are established guidelines that you could certainly build upon, and these are the Secretary of the Interior standards, and they're a list of concepts about maintaining, repairing, and replacing historic materials, as well as designing new additions or alterations to historic buildings. And there are separate lists for each of those 4 items I talked about earlier: preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reconstruction. They're the basis for many rehabilitation projects that use state or federal funds. Their state and federal entities will look to these during the funding process. And they often, as I said, help guide and influence local design review processes. Financial incentives. There are numerous financial incentives for preservation. One of these is grants through public and private entities, nonprofits such as the National Trust for Historic Preservation, or private foundations such as the Gates Foundation. Colorado is very unique in that it has the State Historical Fund which is operated through History Colorado, and this is a very strong program that offers grants for many purposes, from acquisition of a historic building to planning the development of a restoration to the bricks and mortar rehabilitation itself. And actually, Colorado Preservation is partially funded through grants from the State Historical Fund, so it covers a lot of ground. Another financial incentive is tax credits, historic tax credits. And these, there are state and federal historic tax credits. The Colorado state tax credit provides 20 to 30% return on all eligible work for a site, depending on a use, whether it's for a private homeowner or income-producing property. And federal historic tax credits provide a 20% return on all eligible work for income-generating sites. And so essentially, if a developer wants to come in and rehab a historic building, he can get up to 50% of his eligible costs back. And before coming here, I worked in historic tax credits in the Midwest, and it encourages so much development there in all cities, big and small, all over. It's a very big incentive. And in Colorado, between 1991 and 2010, the state historic tax credit was used for 951 projects for almost a total of $100 million. And the federal historic tax credit was used for 374 projects for an additional $526 million. And the following information is taken from that pamphlet that I sent around. This was a study that was done on the economic benefits of preservation. It was done in 2011, so the numbers are a little dated, but there's a new one that will be coming out this February at our annual Saving Places conference with updated information on the benefits of preservation. Economic benefits. Preservation projects in and of themselves are more labor intensive, and they require specialized skills, thus creating more construction jobs. There are 32 new jobs for every $1 million spent on preservation projects in a community. In Colorado, this created 34,000 full-time jobs between 1981 and 2010, and preservation projects also generated tax revenues in local communities and for the state. Another benefit is heritage tourism, which they touched on. It provides another significant benefit to communities. It lets people know that Inglewood is unique. It's different from Denver. It's different from Lakewood. It lets the community itself be proud of their heritage. But a little bit about numbers, heritage tourists spend an average of $114 more than just general tourists, and they also stay longer in the communities where they visit. And there are also grant opportunities available to support heritage tourism in communities, such as the funding of a museum or preserving historic sites, things like that. Community benefits. Again, this is something that people, when they recognize the unique history of their neighborhood or of their city or of their downtown, it helps to establish a sense of place and a sense of belonging in that community. It builds healthy neighborhoods, towns, and cities. And in addition to that, one common misnomer with preservation is that it decreases property values. Preservation does not decrease property values. It often leads to appreciation rates that are either consistent with or higher than rates in similar non-designated areas. And there's a few case studies in the pamphlet about that from Colorado. And again, with environmental benefits, as I said, the greenest building is one that already exists. When you demolish a building, you are destroying the embodied energy that was in that building, and then you're spending more energy on demolition, on new construction, new materials, everything like that. And to help with preservation, there are numerous partner organizations, and that's sort of where we come in. We help to connect cities, individuals, organizations with partner organizations so that they can work with each other, learn from each other. There are several national and state nonprofits that support historic preservation. There are public organizations such as certified local governments and private organizations as well. And we are a public nonprofit, Colorado Preservation, Inc. We were founded in 1984 to help with statewide preservation projects. We accomplish this through a three-prong approach that focuses on outreach, advocacy, and technical services. And these are done through 5 signature programs, the Endangered Places Program, which I am a part of, our annual Saving Places Conference, Preservation Services Program, which helps individuals with manage grants, apply for grants, tax credit work, things like that. We have our annual Dana Crawford Awards, which honor preservation projects throughout the state, and again, advocacy. The Endangered Places Program itself was created in 1997. We are about to celebrate our 20th year, and this is a way to save historic sites that are threatened with immediate loss through demolition, changing economics, encroaching development, a variety of things. And we also have a variety of sites that have been listed and we will list in the future. Buildings, entire districts. We have the neon signs on Colfax. So there are just a lot of resources in your community that could be saved, that could be recognized as important. The goal is to promote historic preservation throughout Colorado and to build awareness for these endangered sites, and also to provide technical assistance and education to the individuals and to the communities in which these sites are located. We have 39 sites, sites in all over the state. We have 39 sites that have been listed and then saved, 69 sites that have been that are currently in progress, and 6 sites that have been lost. And another kind of part of the Endangered Places Program are weekend workshops that are a way for volunteers, local volunteers, to come together to work on a project. They learn about historic preservation, they learn about historic building techniques, and they can have a greater stake in their community through these. And some of the success stories that we've had through this program that could easily be replicated in Inglewood. In Boulder, we had the Grandview Terrace neighborhood that was threatened with encroaching development, and we worked with the University of Colorado and the city to keep 11 of these historic bungalows in their locations and to move others off-site as a way to preserve them. Another success story was in Pueblo. There were 2 historic downtown buildings that were actually being threatened with demolition, and the developer wanted to put it in a parking lot. But many organizations worked together, and the buildings were sold to the Pueblo Housing Administration and turned into low-income apartments for the community. And they've had full occupancy when they opened in 2008.
Mrs. Rinke, I'm sorry, could I ask you to just run through the success stories relatively quickly? I apologize. We're running a little bit short. I don't mind running a few minutes over, but we are scheduled to start another meeting at 7:30,
okay.
So I apologize.
Well, this is the last one, actually. And then downtown Greeley, and this is a similar story. It started with listing. The community got together and worked to developers came in and new businesses came into the downtown, and it's now a thriving area. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to cut you off there. I wanted to leave an opportunity for some response from council prior to ending the meeting here. I guess I'd like to just kind of do a round robin or questions or comments for the board. Go ahead, Lorette.
I don't think 4.5 minutes is enough to discuss trying to organize a board. So maybe I would think that we would want to have some discussion and come back on some of the plethora of issues that have been brought up. And there's a lot of concerns with some of the boards that have been done in other areas, how you connect it with the comp plan, how you connect it with designing, who would decide who would be eligible for any incentives or tax credits and stuff, whether that would, and then how the makeup of this board. You guys have suggested 5, and with a couple of them being from your organization. So I was just hoping that we would be able to schedule something in the future to have maybe a more in-depth conversation about all of the stuff that they brought up, because it's just not enough time.
Sure. This is just an introduction tonight to some of the ideas that we have, and kind of geared around the importance of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, I totally agreed. I think this is the first step in a process, working with your group to try to figure out how to implement some of these ideas into our community. I like the comprehensive plan ideas. I think that as the council is working with those, we can consider those recommendations. I like the idea of a historic preservation committee. I think the council will have to try to discuss that and come up with what we think sort of makes sense. I love the idea that you're focusing on voluntary efforts of the private property owners and working in partnership with them rather than trying to force something down someone's sort of throat. And I'll just say that I really appreciate all of your efforts personally. I recognize that the history of Inglewood is really uniquely Inglewood and makes us a uniquely desirable place to be. So I think this is something that we need to do a better job of communicating and celebrating with our community moving forward. So again, I appreciate your efforts there. Linda.
Thank you for coming, and I am in strong support of seeing us do a historic commission of some sort. I've been saying it for a while, so I'm really glad that you agree. And I also would like, when we have our next discussion about this, let's take a look at the EMC 16611 and this was, I could never understand this. I've had this in a file for a while. Like, what have we been doing with this? There was a time, and I think, Lorette, you were probably on council at the time, if it was 2005, right? So maybe, if we can go back and see what the historic records are for this being developed and why there wasn't a commission set up, it would be helpful. I particularly live in a district that has some really amazing homes, and Arapahoe Acres is an obvious, beautiful, bright, pink elephant in the room that needs some care, and it's care in terms of the kind of desires that many of the homeowners want to preserve it, and yet some of the property rights issues. It's one thing to say, oh, we'll just have property rights be central here. Well, we ought to describe what that is, and I would hope that you would be a little bit more articulate about where you come down on that to be helpful. I mean, I looked at your mission statement, and I see that you're really about educating and acquainting. So it's no more than that. It's not advocating, is it? Or is it? Are you advocates too? Are you doing advocacy, or do you want to become that? Or do you see the commission set up by the Englewood Council being the advocate for the historic preservation?
Well, it's simply a
It's
matter
a little different role. It's like community organizing and speaking out and sometimes taking courageous steps that not everybody agrees with.
And that's the unique opportunity here with the Historic Preservation Commission, because it can be two independent portions. You know, we reach out to the community right now and we offer education to the community of the historical importance and the history of the city of Englewood. Whereas the Historic Preservation Commission, we can work closely with them to help balance that you say with property rights.
Decide what the design guidelines are and whether or not we still follow this or not. I did want to give you, I was thinking, Doug, you might want this, but this is my neighborhood, and it's the original sales brochure for my little 1950s neighborhood, which is nothing like Arapahoe Acres 1950s.
That's cool.
I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you for presenting, though. I look forward to the next conversation.
Yeah, and we definitely do too. And if you ever want us back, we'd love to talk to you a little more about it.
Thank you again for being here. And with that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. We'll pick this back up next door in just a couple minutes.
Oh, everybody's got one. I'm sure.